The best field medical teams use these key strategies in order to better their HCP engagements and derive truly actionable medical insights from every single interaction. Have you ever wondered why some MSLs seem to have really strong KOL relationships and how they're continuously bringing back streams of insights around medical needs, or what are the biggest kind of barriers that their KOLs are facing in getting that right treatment to patients? So in this video, I'll cover what we've seen top performing MSLs as well as field medical teams do tactically in order to build really authentic, true advisory-like relationships with HCPs, as well as be able to really extract and be on top of or a leader in getting the right type of insights from different engagements or through congresses or through the clinical trials that they might be a part of if they're investigator initiated. So the first thing is that they understand that the healthcare landscape has ultimately shifted. There was the old world way of doing field medical, which was typically focused on research-centric KOLs. So you would have a specific disease state, you would map out the really research-centric KOLs who have influence within the research community, do a lot of publications in the space. You would have a field medical team go after, build those relationships in the hopes that ultimately having that research-centric KOL understand this new potential line of therapy or treatment, they can educate the community, and then that would ultimately spread down to the patients. But while some elements of that still continue to be true today, depending on what the disease state is and what the barriers to access are for the treatment for patients, the world has shifted. And MSLs that I talk to that are having success, they understand that the world looks different today than it did before. Instead, what's oftentimes missing in this old world is the patient themselves. And what's different today is oftentimes the research-centric KOL is not actually always the HCP that's actually in front of the patient. It could be nurse practitioners, it could be your local private practice, or the doctor in a hospital that's running around trying to do surgeries. Those are the doctors that are truly in front of the patient and are actually seeing what are their symptoms, what are the problems. If you have a medicine that's out there, what are the problems in getting that medicine into the patient's hands? So in the new world, it's also no longer just HCPs. When we think about the end-to-end patient journey, right? And if we think about as medical affairs, our job is how do we get the right medicine at the right time or the right support for that patient at the right time. That patient, as they're going through their journey, right? They're encountering their insurer, the pharmacy, the insurer, which is the payer, right? The HCP, the patient advocacy group, the hospital system, right? So there's all of these stakeholders on a patient's entire journey. And it's no longer the case that as medical affairs, we only target KOLs. It has to be a holistic picture of really understanding that there's multiple stakeholders that are in the equation. And that from a medical affairs strategy and also a field medical strategy perspective, we have to keep in mind what are the needs of each stakeholder that are relevant to our patients. So then our job ultimately becomes uncovering the different gaps across all of these different stakeholders in order to make the true impact on the end-to-end patient journey. And field medical teams understand that it's not just about the KOL, it's also about all of these other stakeholders that they have to be cognizant of in terms of really extracting true insights across the board. So that's one. In this new world today, the other big difference, and we've heard the term patient-centricity thrown around for a very long time, and it is important, and there's a reason we should be patient-centric with value-based care delivery, and as pharmaceutical companies or med device companies, patient-centricity is truly key. So if we do align on the fact that in this new world, patient-centricity is our ultimate goal, then we have to work backwards. And when we talk about having those multiple stakeholders, if we work backwards from what are the gaps against the treatment guidelines that the patient is receiving, then we start to identify the actual stakeholders that we need to go out and talk to in order to close those gaps. That could be also a research-centric KOL. No problem. It could also be a nurse practitioner. It could also be a patient advocacy group or a patient registry organization, whoever that might be. So that's like a key shift in mentality over the last decade from kind of the old way of how things have always been done when it comes to field medical to more of the new way of, if you want to be patient-centric and truly successful, then start with what are the patient gaps and how do we work backwards and address the right stakeholders throughout that entire process. So if we align on that and we've prioritized the different stakeholders we need to reach out to, the next key step and the next key tactic that MSLs do, that are the ones who are really on top of it in terms of building those relationships and uncovering the right needs, is really truly being stakeholder centric. So similar in concept to patient-centricity, we take that a level deeper into the different stakeholders. Your doctor, right, that you're engaging with, they have needs, they have stresses about the patients that they're trying to treat. The patient advocacy group, it's the same thing. You have to understand through your conversations and asking those in-depth questions of what are their needs, and then how do you as a field medical team become that advisor. As pharmaceutical companies, you have access to swaths of therapeutic disease data. How can that data be leveraged as a value creator for the stakeholders that you're trying to engage with, for that KOL, for that doctor? So start to think about it that way in terms of your every interaction. And what that ultimately requires is for you to be on top of everything that is happening in the therapeutic space as well as with that stakeholder. So what that means is you have to keep in tune with all of the different publications, attend the congresses, look through the congress abstracts, discover KOLs who are also talking about the disease state that you're interested in, plan accordingly. For each KOL that you're engaging with, you're always continuously staying on top of what is that KOL doing, because you're constantly thinking about how can I provide value to them to build that relationship, and then ultimately understand what does the patient themselves really need. And then that's ultimately the stakeholder centricity and coming at your relationships through a value add perspective. It's what's going to get you those quality insights that a lot of top performing medical teams are getting today. And the way to kind of summarize the other kind of strategy that I've seen top performing field medical teams do in leveraging a lot of this data, if they're staying on top of right publications, congresses, their internal data that can be shared with KOLs to help the patient, etc., is that oftentimes they take what I call a personalized approach versus a personalized approach. Look, it's always great in relationships to remember the birthdays, to celebrate the happy occasions, to reach out, to the KOL when their son or daughter goes to college and say congratulations. That's just part of building any sort of personal connection. But ultimately, what you're there is to provide value for the patient. And a personalized approach puts that value at the forefront. So I'll walk through an example of the differences. So a personalized approach could be, let's say you're trying to reach out to Dr. Alex because you have an update to give on a new indication for your therapeutic disease state. So you're like, hey, Dr. Alex, congratulations. I know your birthday was this week. I hope you had a wonderful time with Mary, your wife, and your kids. So wanted to share some exciting news about a recent clinical trial. We have some early data. Would love to discuss, are you available on XYZ? So that's a kind of a personalized, individually personalized approach versus a persona-wise approach is you're thinking about what are the problems that Dr. Alex faces in his practice. And it could be the fact that, let's say Dr. Alex treats diabetics and there is a certain comorbidity, maybe it's cardiovascular comorbidity of some sort that typically his population that he treats comes with. And this new indication that is launching happens to be one that's really friendly to cardiovascular comorbidities, or maybe it's a new unlock where the previous drug, if you had a certain type of cardiovascular issue, you can take it. So a more persona-wise approach is very problem focused. It would take the approach of, hey, Dr. Alex, like, hope you had a great birthday. I know we've previously discussed your patients that you treat typically have cardiovascular issues, but you're really passionate about getting them the right diabetic treatment. Well, I'm super excited to share that actually what we're seeing in our early clinical trial data for this new indication is that folks with cardiovascular comorbidity are responding very positively. And I think there actually could be an opportunity for us to treat your patients with this comorbidity together. Like, that's the problem-focused approach versus the individual personalized approach. So that, if anything, out of all of the takeaways of this, that is like the one thing to start to think about in terms of what are the different stakeholders, what are their problems, and how can I orient every time I touch base with them and provide value from that problem perspective. And in order to do that successfully, you have to stay on top of everything. You have to have a process around your data gathering, around your insights gathering, around keeping up with the therapeutic landscape, right? So that's the challenge. Almost is less the personalization. It's more of how do you stay on top of everything while you have other competing priorities. So that's why the next part of this video, that's exactly what we're going to cover. So how do you stay on top of that? So key, of course, is automating a lot of processes, right? So the first step really is to just take a look at everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, and which components of it tend to be very manual and time-consuming. Is it publications research? Is it inputting your CRM notes? Is it keeping up to date with treatment guidelines, right? Or is it combing through patient registries? Is it staying up to date with what Dr. Alex is doing on social media? It's like all of those things. Out of all of the things that you're doing, which ones are taking the most time that you feel intuitively could be automated if you had the right tools? You might not be a coder or a data scientist, but like, let's say if you were, out of all of those things, what do you feel like is possible to automate? Take all of that and then start to prioritize which ones take up the most chunk of your time on the one axis. And then on the second axis, what do you feel like intuitively should be able to be easily automated? And once you've kind of map that out, then you can start to actually automate some of this stuff. So for example, Congress abstracts, if you're preparing for a Congress, right? And you want to be prepared. So you want to go through all of the Congress abstracts, find the KOLs that you're interested in, whether new or ones you have a previous relationship with, and really come prepared when you are at the Congress to engage with them. Well, that is something that today could be manually done. You could go to ASH, for example, and pull the 6,000 abstracts and go through them manually, pop them in a spreadsheet, maybe have some sort of formula that tries to classify what those different abstracts are and whether they're relevant. That's also something that you could leverage automations for. So think GPT. Could you use GPT prompts if you do have access to that internally as an organization to help automate some of that process? By the way, if you're looking or are interested in any sort of prompts, we do have a guidebook specifically for field medical in terms of leveraging GPT prompts to help extract insights or classify certain information. Let's say you want to pull tweets from, that Dr. Alex has on Twitter, or tweets around a specific Congress, things like that. So if you're interested in automating that, just DM me on LinkedIn. Happy to share the guidebook and advise on how to best automate that. So that's like one example, right? But there's probably many more. Do you have a good process set up for insights gathering? Like if there's 4 core priorities or questions that your team has, are you making sure that the questions you're asking and when you're taking the notes that you're labeling them correctly, right? So that way it's super easy to get into the CRM and then to report on. Are you staying in touch and doing publications review for your therapeutic area congresses? It's a little bit more complex. It might be hard to automate with just GPT, but do you have notifications set up for when new publications come out around your therapeutic state? Are you following KOLs on Twitter in your space and have notifications set up for them? Are you able to pull their tweets as well as pull the publications? Use GPT if you do have access to that to kind of analyze it for you so you're always up to date. So this is the mentality of, especially going into 2024, take a look at your existing process and see what is the most time consuming that can give you the most leverage. If you could automate it, you can spend time doing other things, and then start tackling that one by one. And if you have questions, if you have a specific process you're trying to automate, like, DM me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to be a resource and advise. If there's a way to do it with GPT or a simple Sheets script, I'm happy to share that with you to help you get started. And ultimately at Atrix, we're really passionate about helping field medical teams really gather and analyze insights and automate all of that tedious process, whether it's publications review to Congress abstracts review to pulling in all of the different field medical insights and extracting valuable data from that. So that way you can better engage with HCPs, be stakeholder centric, and truly uncover those medical needs that will take your strategy and make you that innovative leader when it comes to your category. So as always, don't hesitate to reach out, DM me on LinkedIn with any sort of questions, and I'll see you next time.